Very good morning to all of you. Thank you for streaming in. Warm welcome to the fourth and final session of the immersive NASSCOM series on corporate startup collaboration. I am Siddharth Kadandale, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm immensely to share that we've had good participation, outreach, and engagement with over 100 organizations over the course of the series. We've had illustrious experienced panelists from entities such as Daimler, Bosch, Cisco, Samsung, and Intel, as well as startups from their partnership cohorts who've shared incredible insights and highly practical takeaways from their respective journeys. We have covered various themes over the last 3 weeks, from defining the formula for successful partnerships to navigating the complexities of corporate startup partnerships to musings on the journey. We attempted to discuss almost every element of what goes into building a high impact, high outcome driven, successful corporate startup partnership model. Another intent that we had as part of the series come out with a playbook that would be guiding reference document of sorts for a lot of new age GCCs and startups who are embarking on their own journeys. So in conclusion to this series, from all the insights and gathering, we will be publishing a playbook over the coming few days. This will be made available to all the participants who participated in the panel discussion so far. Given today is the final session, we wanted to conclude a very meaningful and purpose-driven note. So today's session will focus on how corporate partnerships can drive social impact in India and propel our communities forward. We want this discussion, and our audience to post any questions you may have in the chat box over the course of the next 30 minutes. This time we just have one corporate and one startup. We wanted to keep this more focused, so the session duration will only be for 30 minutes. With that, I would like to welcome our guests for today. First, we have with us Ravishankar Rao, who currently heads strategy and operations for Cisco engineering site. He is a member of NASSCOM's R&D Council. He also has a very deep entrepreneurial focus and works extensively with non-profit startups. Warm welcome to you, Ravi. To present thank you. And to present the startup perspective, we have with us Dr. Priyanjali Datta, who is the founder and CEO at Aaroogya Foundation, a dental surgeon by education, documentary maker by passion, a creative entrepreneur. She has built 4 successful startups. Very warm welcome to you, Dr. Priya.
Thanks, Siddharth.
Thank you both today, and I'm very excited to learn from your experience. I would now request Ravi and Dr. Priya to briefly share a quick 1-minute context about the initiatives and the startups that you are leading, so the audience gets a better understanding of where you come from.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. So I think, Siddharth, as you mentioned in the introduction, operations for the engineering India. So my role is essentially to work across the site leaders that we have here in Cisco India to work on various strategic initiatives which are in some sense important to Cisco. So there's an internal part of my role and an external part of my role in terms of looking at the Indian ecosystem in general and how to sort of maximize the investment in some sense that we made. Does allow me to interact with a large number of startups, across the Indian ecosystem, and I have personally spent a lot of time with the non-profit sector, corporate social responsibility teams, and I've had an opportunity to work with Dr. Priya, in the work that she's doing, help. Yeah, that's all from my side. Maybe Dr. Priya, if you could provide your intro.
Thank you, Ravi. I'm very glad today to be on this panel. I have heard from Siddharth. I have been working on my non-profit startup since college. I was a dental surgeon. I work full-time for Aaroogya Foundation. The idea of my bigger goal in life is to advance gender equity and well-being, and for which I love creating products which can be scaled and this mission in life can be fulfilled. So Aaroogya International Foundation is the most fulfilling journey that I have had so far. And over time, I've realized that the Indian ecosystem is evolving for the betterment of startups, both in for-profit and non-profit space. So we landed at the Cisco's incubation program with the NASSCOM Foundation, which was the best start. And fortunately, Ravi has been our mentor. So that has given us immensely a great growth rate. And I can vouch for it that anyone who is in the audience and willing to start a startup, this is the right time.
Thank you so much, Ravi and Dr. Priya. Very inspiring work that both of you are involved in, and I would love to get to the depth of it and understand more about the partnership itself. So let's start off with the discussion. My first question is to Ravi. As you mentioned, you're leading, there's a dual role that you're playing, internal Cisco, external ecosystem. You've been extensively involved with nonprofit startups, but at the same time also focusing on operational engineering side here. So, could you tell us a little more about this dual role, how this kind of responsibility has come about, and what's the kind of focus that you have on both the ends?
So my role is actually quite diverse, as I mentioned. There's both an internal aspect as well as an external aspect. I think, as I sort of mentioned in the introduction, Cisco has quite a tremendous and very large presence in India. We have 12,000 employees across a range of functions, and made very significant investments over the last 20-25 years. I think from an India perspective, certainly, there are sort of two dimensions. One is from a startup perspective, we certainly see, a tremendous momentum in for-profit space, right? So, for example, India now has, I think, 21 unicorns. But at the same time, as a country, we do, have to support the ecosystem with respect to, healthcare, in terms of sanitation. There are a large number of pressing problems from an India perspective, which we probably require a much greater focus on the social and sort of economic metric, if I can, or environmental metrics, I would say, more importantly. And I think that's a realization that companies in some sense are facing today. And I think you're going to see more with respect to, I think from our perspective, Cisco has certainly been one of the companies at the forefront of trying to, I think, develop the space. We're hugely involved in the whole sort of corporate social responsibility ecosystem. And we actually see, maybe two or three we have multiple areas of focus: critical human needs, economic empowerment, education, and then also looking at these. So, for example, COVID-19 has certainly in the second wave. We look at all of these different things. I think from a vertical perspective, healthcare and agriculture would probably be important focus areas, right? Just criticality to the Indian ecosystem.
Thanks, Ravi. That definitely sets good context into the breadth and the depth of the efforts that you're making at Cisco towards social impact. And probably we'll come to how we in the next question. So having had this insight into how the Cisco program works, you mentioned there is a cohort setup that you do every time, and you're now into your third cohort. My question, I'll move it to Dr. Priya. Aaroogya Foundation is a graduate of Cisco's recent social organization focus cohort. What led you to partner with Cisco as a social impact nonprofit startup? What has changed for you since?
That's a really important question. So when we started Aaroogya Foundation, we wanted to intervene in the space of the help of technology at a really wide scale. And India's 70% population lives in rural India. The accessibility with physical infrastructure cannot be practically next 90 years. The scalable way to access and provide services is the technology infrastructure that And also the paying capacity of our customers is very low because they all come from a little less background. And we had been struggling for a very long time in our R&D to and the right funder who can understand the ethos of Aaroogya. And fortunately, as I said earlier, we found the best program where we got incubated. It was Cisco's incubation for non-profit startups, which is working with technology-enabled solutions, and the Nudge Foundation incubation. So I think there were reasons for us, and Cisco was the best option for us because they understood that we need investment, even being a non-profit, we need investment to develop the solution, to develop the technology, to build the business model, and also we needed hand-holding, not just funds. So they provided the best ecosystem, Nudge and Cisco together. I think I've set a great example for non-profits in India to scale up. We have come far. And after the incubation program, we have actually grown 60 times, both in terms of our intervention and our growth. So we also have started working outside in Uganda. We got the opportunity to export our technology and establish a mark in Africa. So I think Cisco has really given us that, entire gamut of ecosystem to do that.
Technology platform, scale, and mentorship were the key to 60x growth. That's very interesting. We here, so Dr. Priya did mention about Cisco's incubation center. So what's Cisco's philosophy behind engaging social impact startups to educated in? How is this different from a traditional CSR program? And also a follow-up question to that would be, how are you identifying problem statements? And when you say agri-tech and healthcare, your focus areas, how did that decision come about?
Yeah, all questions, right? So I think what is very interesting is that when you look at sort of for-profit entities and non-profit entities, by and large, the problems that each of those faces is very similar, right? In terms of maybe getting access to human capital, as an example, or figuring out how to scale technology, right? Or even trying to figure out how to make things sustainable, right? So it's just that the segment and the sector in some sense is different, but if you really look and peel the onion, as it were, you will actually find that the problem statements are very, very similar. It's just that one works in the non-profit space and the other one works in the for-profit space, right? So what I think we realized is that if you really want to, I think, make an impact in the sort of the social space, one is that it's more difficult because it's probably more fragmented in some sense. To the point Dr. Priya mentioned around India being perhaps a price-sensitive country, you would not really be able to get. You'd have to essentially drive scale and volume, right? In order to make things sustainable. But in order to really support a large number of the non-profits, and I think probably they need more support in some sense, just given the type of problems that they work on, because of the complexities that are involved. I think what we realized is there a way in which we can provide technology support? Is there a way we can provide mentorship support in addition to monetary funding? Actually get there. I think it's not so much even about monetary funding, but it's about staying engaged, profit over a period of time in order to actually see that level of sustainability. So what we also realized is, I think earlier on, we kind of realized that there's a lot of focus and emphasis on the for-profit sector, but for the problems that I've mentioned, the non-profit, there is probably a scope to play in terms of incubating and providing that requisite support. So that's something that we, I think, are looking into and we've sort of developed. And we've also kind of adapt our overall sort of methodology, as sort of in response. So One of the things that we have currently have launched is an agri-tech challenge. So the question around scale can only come in if you can actually distribute, the spread right across a wide region. So we've actually launched an agri-tech challenge because agriculture is probably one of the sectors outside of healthcare that certainly requires a lot of focus. Education is another one, right, which is very important for India. But I think it's really about focusing on those social needs, the critical human needs, as I mentioned, things like economic empowerment, education, and then of course, when you look at the COVID pandemic, there's a lot of crisis support as well that extended as many other companies did. So I hope that answers your questions.
Sure, absolutely, Ravi. I think one part of the philosophy is driving sustained engagement. So my question to Priya there is, course of your partnership with Cisco's cohort program or the Nudge Foundation, you expect the corporate to play a different role across time, right? From the time they bring you on board as a partner to incubation to you scale. So how do you expect this role from a corporate to evolve over time to maximize the impact that you have?
Sure. I think the most important challenges we face is talent in the team, and definitely a lot of hand holding in developing business model, because even though the word as called as non-profit, it's a lot. I call it a misnomer, because anything which says non-profit sounds like long-term sustainability. So we need a lot of mentoring on how to make the whole system and solution sustainable, where corporate organizations like Cisco play a very important role in developing the mindset in the team and the talent. Another challenge that we face is the gap of enough human resource, which also gets fulfilled by such programs where Cisco provided us with. Ravi was our main mentor, and we also had some other teams helping us in the development of technology and hiring the right people, HR support. So these are something that a startup struggles to have at the first place. And if they do not have such support, it will come at a really high cost. So these are some of the important challenges. And with Cisco's and Foundation's incubation program, we could actually overcome these hurdles pretty well. And they were really immersive. We had their support day in and day out. So I think the should move towards this way of CSR or venture philanthropy rather than just funding programs for a nonprofit. So yeah, that's my take on this.
Thank you so much, Priya. And you did mention nonprofit is a misnomer, and that kind of changes the context in which we approach solving problem statements. I'll direct this question to Ravi. For-profit corporate startup partnership geared towards joint go-to-market, new product development, a lot of economic metrics that have a direct top line or a bottom line impact to the company. But what are your environmental metrics for success, as you put it in your introduction, when the focus is on creating so?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, right? So I think one is it'll probably sort of, in some sense, maybe impact investing, if I can call it that, right? But I think at a high level, if you really look at some of the metrics that we use, right? So I think one is it's about for example, the number of people that you can touch, right, with the intervention, right? So in very simple terms, the number of beneficiaries, what is the element of technology that you're really using, right? So when you're thinking about scale, I think elements. One is there is a technology element to the problem, and then there's a secondary element where you need the government in many of these cases to support and scale these initiatives, right? In some sense, you take healthcare or agriculture or education or any of these sanitation, any of these major problems that we have in India, any non-profit or any entity that is actually working in this space will only grow to a certain level and you will certainly need the assistance of the government collaboratively with the government to try and figure out to. So that's another sort of element that we, I think, look at in terms of what are the types of sense, right? That you kind of are able to establish. And then, of course, for every one of our grants, I mean, as I've said, in terms of you almost have to measure this like a project, a for-profit project, where you have very well-defined milestones, the efficiency of capital in some sense, which has been deployed. So, as I said, I mean, the similarity between a for-profit and non-profit are quite similar. It's just that the market segment is different. The nature of problems is different. But if you actually go underneath, you would find that all of them, struggle with the same thing. So you almost have to bring that for-profit mindset in some way, right, for the long term, to the non-profit space, right, in some way, in order to actually help drive scale and make things sustainable.
Sure, that's a very interesting point. Bringing the for-profit mindset and making sure you're driving it like a project and making it more engaged and sustained. So probably the next question, I'll go back to Dr. And from the research that I did about Aaroogya Foundation, you've been engaged with quite a few MNCs over the last 4+ years. How have you seen response from the corporates evolve over time, right? In terms of the resources they're bringing to the table, the effort, the time, the technology, all the elements. And how has it evolved over the last 4 years? And are programs in themselves also evolving into more sustained partnerships? In a lot of ways, if I can add a different flavor to that, how do you see the future of CSR?
Thanks, Siddharth. So in last 4 years, we have evolved from being at a state where companies would come to us and say that, okay, this is a program for just come and do ABC work for us and we will pay you this much. From that stage now, we have evolved into a serious funding landscape, a serious partnership and collaboration landscape where MNCs are helping immensely in establishing the organization capacity also. We have been fortunate enough to find the right partners. Apart from Cisco, we have worked with PepsiCo, who has also helped in similar manner. We have also worked with HDFC. They have helped us with a lot of financial support in terms of banking and taxes and all those things, which are also big challenges for a startup to figure out. And we have worked with Schlumberger, who is also looking at a larger scale of collaboration so that meaningful scale of solution can be attained rather than just being program specific. So I think the that I have seen in past few years is from being a program centric partnership for a short term to moving more towards meaningful collaboration. And if I want to put it correctly in terms of venture philanthropy, I think that would be the word to use here. People are moving towards venture philanthropy, and recently collaborated with Mullah Foundation, which is one of the venture philanthropy organization that funds and also helps to design for scale. So I think all the MNCs are very well versed now with the playbook of how to engage with a non-profit. So we are still a long way to go, but we are almost evolving at a good pace right now.
Just to go a little deeper into that, so we have a long way to go. So what needs to work?
Now, apart from the big MNCs who have understood the landscape, we still have a large chunk of MNCs and corporate social responsibilities funds, which is mostly given out in silos. Say, for example, if we want to do a program funding for a small piece of health, a small piece of education, and a small piece of agriculture, the program milestone will be achieved, but the larger impact might not be a significant unit of change. An MNC adopts, like Cisco has the Agri-Tech Challenge now, which is a serious responsibility, and there's a great amount of work happening there. That will really create a long-term change towards positive impact. And I being a citizen of Delhi, I suffer a lot from pollution here. So that's the kind of from such. But the long way to go means that MNCs should start working on one cause so that they can attain full change and help organizations build the organizational capacity to work at that level. Because small projects will not give out change that we want to see, and maybe the money will just stay in silos. So that's what I meant.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. And Ravi, similar question. So from the corporate, think needs to be executed better, and also, in terms of the leadership level discussion that's happening around being involved with. Are you seeing that change in terms of more effort and more resources being invested towards that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Siddharth. So I think when you sort of deal with non-profit space way of the problems that we have, I think there are two or three things, right? One is that if you operate purely from a for-profit mindset, the problem statements are very risky, right? Because of the fact that going to be able to make money, but this is more around the social things, right? So I think in some way to shed inhibition and basically take a little bit of a more more risk in some sense, right, as they engage in this space, because the payoff in some sense would not be in monetary terms, but it would be in terms of social and maybe environmental outcomes, right? So I think that's the one thing. The second thing is a long-term approach is very, very crucial. You can't operate this with a short-term mindset. So, for example, even if you were to engage as a mentor, right, with any of the non-profits, I always is that non-profit requires the assistance more than you would require as a person, right, or as a company representative that you would require the non-profit. So the amount of time that you spend, there is a non-profit, right? So the more you spend, the better. And you have to stay, I think, engaged for the long term, because change in a lot of these spaces takes a lot of time, right? Because of the problems that they deal with. The third thing is probably that we maybe evolve to a consortia-based approach for some of these very, very difficult problems, right? So can companies and together areas of interest so that we kind of all work together, solve to do their own thing, as it were, right? So I really see probably those two or three which are probably critical from a corporate perspective.
Thanks, Ravi. And I think that's a very important bringing consortia also helps drive better engagement with the. You're actually working towards a goal with big scale and solving problems that are very, very pertinent to India's needs today. And it'll be interesting to see how some of these models evolve over time. We're almost at the end of the session. This was a brief 30-minute panel discussion that we had. On that note, thank you so much. This was certainly very information-packed, extremely insightful. Thank you both for taking the time out and your experience with us. Both of you are working towards a very ambitious and noble goal, with the vision of reaching 50 million underprivileged women and more across developing nations for the early detection of common cancers and actually saving lives. So I wish you the very best. And I hope you realize all of those dreams that both of you are working towards. Note, that brings us to the end immersive series. As I mentioned, this was the fourth and the final one. It was extremely important for us to end it on something very meaningful. And thanks to Cisco as well as Aaroogya Foundation for coming on board and sharing this with us. The last 4 weeks have found this extremely insightful and gather takeaways that you can apply in your own journey. And I'd like to thank NASSCOM for all the support in making